Welcome to this episode of A Facilitator's Journey. Today I'm joined by Mark Walsh, the embodiment coach. Mark and I are going to talk, as you will hear in a moment, all about how his business went from being a solopreneur to accidentally becoming the CEO of a tech company that would turn over 7 figures, all the way back and scaling back to a medium-sized company. We were talking about, with fame comes notoriety. You start to get driven by your ego. How do you manage a business when you're having to find £150,000 every month to pay the team's salaries? So it's a lovely conversation, just our musings and our noticings. The other bit I really loved was Mark's, when I said to him, what do you measure each week? He didn't come back with the answer I thought he would. So the invitation is to pull up a chair, get your cup of tea, tune in your ears and enjoy this episode. So Mark, hello.
Hi Kirsty, nice to see you again.
Welcome to the SOF Podcast. The question I always ask everyone at the beginning is, how do we know one another? How do we meet?
Me and you personally, I'd love to answer that question more philosophically. Can I answer it more broadly?
Yeah.
How do we know each other? Like, that's actually a profound question. I'd say we don't get to know each other through words and information. I think we know each other implicitly through the body, through touch, movement, ritual, dance, song, eating together, making love, etc. And we haven't done all those things.
No,
for the record.
Clarity.
But that is how I prefer to answer the question. How do we know each other?
I quite like that. I can tell you how we met. I came to a circle you were hosting in London, and I reckon it was about 2017. And I came with a friend, Damien Vanfor. And you had
a few years back, wasn't it?
It was a few years back. And then we just sort of stayed connected, did the classic social media dance, as I call it. And that's sort of how it...
Yeah, that's the sort of good use of social media, isn't it? When you meet someone, you like them, you do interesting things, and you just sort of stay lightly connected through socials. Yeah. And I sort of see some of your School of Facilitation stuff, like, oh, that looks good, that was cool, or a podcast or whatever. And then at a certain point you think, oh, I want to guest for the podcast. Oh, there's Mark, he says interesting stuff. And I think that's one of the few good uses of social media, other than sort of destroying our brains and society, that it seems to mostly be used for.
So Mark, could you describe for the listener, describe what you do or how you describe yourself?
Yeah, it depends who I'm talking with. That's where it's difficult describing to the abyss and many people. But embodiment teacher is the sort of simple version.
Okay.
What does that mean? Again, depends who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to coaches, I say I help coaches work practically with the body. So most coaches and facilitators know that the body is part of who we are as people. And I have some sense that it might be useful to incorporate it into training, coaching, facilitation. But then a lot of what's out there on the body is a little esoteric or a little athletic. So I just help them make it really practical. So, if I was talking to facilitators, that's what I'd say. If I was in the context of working in Ukraine or working in business or talking to my mum, I'd probably say something slightly different. So, for your audience, that's probably the best way in.
Thank you. And how long have you been doing that? How long have you been in this space?
Forever, really. I mean, my mum was a yoga teacher. My mum a lot today. Hi, Freud. Oh, what's going on there? And I discovered Aikido at 18 and while doing a psychology degree, and quickly realized psychology and Aikido could be blended together. Professionally for about 20 years, though there was a period about 7 years before that where I was traveling around the world and living out of a bag and doing interesting projects with kids and in war zones and different things. And I was essentially an embodiment teacher then, but kind of more formally for about 20 years now. Nice. Running a company. And then, that's had different iterations. I used to do more business stuff. Then I started training coaches. The last kind of 5 or 6 years, training coaches online. So it says different iterations, but the embodiment piece is the central thing. And that's usually what I'm known for. My book's called Embodiment, my podcast's called Embodiment. So while it has different applications and aspects, that tends to be what I'm associated with.
Love. And I think that's a really interesting comment you make about, embodiment's always been at the core of your business, but then the shape, the physical entity of the business changes shape. And I think that's so natural. Like anyone listening to this who goes, I'm at the start of my journey and it's going to look like this. Well, yeah, it will for the first 2 years, and absolutely guarantee it'll change by year 5. And then again, ad infinitum, depending on you and the situation that's going on in the world. So I think that's something important for people to know.
Yeah, and some of that's just that I get interested in different things. You know, I get interested in different topics. So I was doing stuff on decadence last year, and I've done stuff on life purpose, and I did a course on people pleasing. And, you know, embodiment's a way of working with any theme that involves people, you know, leadership, whatever it is. And some of it's my own interest, some of it's it's kind of more market driven.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, there seems to be an audience for, I'd done courses on boundaries before, but then we reworked it into people pleasing, which is sort of very similar when we realized on the social media that that was a very popular topic. We had a Instagram video that had a few million views. Then we went, okay, let's slightly course change there, because it wasn't so different from what we were already doing. But I love training coaches because you can go very deep with coaches, and they're quite open-minded, and you reach a lot of people. Whereas with business, it was great in some ways, but you know, you have to hold back a little bit with the embodiment stuff. I have to hold off on my sense of humor quite a lot as well when I'm wearing a suit and doing that. Same with kids, but they're all great. Like I learned a lot working with kids over the years, like in terms of presenting and facilitation. Like if you can hold a group of 100 kids in a field or on a ski slope, you can hold a group of business people.
And on a ski slope. So I'm curious.
When
you started your business, Mark, how much business knowledge did you have?
None.
So how did you...
No one in my immediate family had ever run a business.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone that ran a business. Actually, no, it's not true. I knew one guy from Aikido, and I literally sat in his office because he had a little tech company in Brighton where I used to live. And I remember I sat in his office and just going, what do people do here? You know, how does this work? I'd always done sort of adventurous stuff and outdoorsy stuff and stuff for kids. And I literally knew nothing about business. And I actually had quite a negative view of business. I've been brought up to sort of think that, you know, business people weren't good people. And I quickly realized that, you know, like anywhere, there's good and bad people everywhere. And actually learned a lot from that. You know, I subscribed to HR magazine so I could learn the language. I sort of treated it like if you become an expat in a foreign country and you have to kind of learn to culturally assimilate kind of thing. So yeah, for me, it was a huge challenge at first. I remember buying my first suit and just feeling so weird in it. So yeah, it was a great challenge, but I learned a lot from working in business. The emphasis on pragmatism I have in my work, I think, came from business. And business people, when you do stuff, they want to know, why are we doing this? And they want it quick and they want a result. Now that can be taken too far. You can lose flow and creativity in that, but it's actually fair enough. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, why are we here? We're spending our time and our money. Why are we here? And like you don't get away with as much stuff as you might with a group of hippies.
True.
So I think it's really educational for me.
And so today when we were prepping for this, you were very open and transparent about your journey and what you've been on. And I was just really curious about how do people scale up? And you said, well, actually, Kirsty, I've gone from small to big to medium, and there's this scale down. And I was like, oh, well, this is it's an interesting story. And I'm hoping that we can tell people that story of the journey of, I don't know if it's even the last 7 years. And as you say, you even used a really lovely phrase. You said, you know, I accidentally became a tech CEO.
Of a multi-million pound company.
Yeah. Can we go back before all of that? And can you paint a picture for us so people can understand what happened and what that's been like?
I mean, businesses are like penises. You know, everyone thinks theirs is too small, but there is such a thing as too big. And, you know, it really depends which kind of size you enjoy, doesn't it? So
I don't think. Sorry,
I don't know if you're going to have to cut that out, Kirsty.
No, you don't. But I've never had.
The first time I've said that, it's a great quote. That's going on my Facebook. Right?
It's staying in.
So first of all, I started off and I was solo, but my sort of journey was I quickly realized I couldn't do everything.
Good.
Even though I tried to do everything and was burnt out in the first year of starting. So then I went, hang on, you know, maybe I should get a PA.
Good shout.
A virtual PA. And that's the sort of first step. And I still love my PA. Like, she's awesome. You know, I haven't booked a flight in 20 years.
Is it the same PA?
No, I've gone through a few, but I'm in good terms with one of them. Got promoted to an ops manager. One of them I'm still friends with. The last one, she just got a better paid job and she just did a handover to a nice. So it's all good. But they are like your sort of second mum after all. Quite dependent upon them, I find. So VA, PA, absolutely, that was the sort of first thing. And I started realizing, hey, I can outsource things, like getting a cleaner, which I grew up pretty working class. And my mum found out I had a cleaner. She was pissed. She was just like, what? You got a cleaner? She was disgusted at the idea.
Can we just talk about why, as a person who runs their own business, having a cleaner is a useful thing? Because I just want to, I think is very useful.
Well, psychologically, having a clean environment really helpful psychologically, and clean ordered environment. Secondly, it's like, well, is this a good use of, say, 2 hours of my time? So basically, the cleaner takes 2 or 3 hours off me a week. And if my hourly rate is worth more than hers, I don't mean worth in terms of value as a human being or anything, just in terms of money, then I'd be crazy to spend that time doing cleaning when I could be spent making money. I mean, my job as sort of CEO, even for this medium-sized company now, small company, is really to sort of make good and creative decisions. And also, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm on courses. I'm doing podcast today with a well-known British journalist, and I've spent like 10 hours this week researching his stuff, and that's deepening my own knowledge of the work and what I do. I just won't have time for that stuff if I'm doing too many admin chores.
I hear you.
And the other one is I'm sort of, I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, like a little bit ADHD and sort of a weird kind of lazy. Like I don't like doing things I don't want to do, so I work hard hours, but they're long hours doing things I enjoy. So it doesn't feel like work in that way, the whole do what you love kind of thing. And I think that's always a tension when running a business. How do I do more of what I love? Like I love the teaching. I certainly don't mind coming on podcasts. I don't mind researching for my own podcast. There's things I like. But there's I was in a marketing meeting for an hour today, and it's okay. I'm a grown up. I can do an hour of marketing, a couple of times a week. And that's fine. A bit of management. I work with nice people. That's fine. But I'm always trying to reduce the number of hours that are sort of not in my zone of genius, not the things that I love and am good at. Or it's something that's just for fun. There's things that I do as part of work, in inverted commas, that are just like I saw talking to you today and thought, oh, that's chill. That's not, even though it's sort of marketing, networking, something, I don't know. It's also just like, yeah, it's fine. It's a nice thing to do after lunch. So that's the battle, I think, running a business.
Yeah, I agree. So you got your first PA. That's been something you've stuck with, haven't booked a flight for 20 odd years. Love that. And you were a solopreneur. What happened sort of just as a bit of a potted history to bring us up to being...
Yeah. So started doing bigger courses, realized I needed course administrators. Everyone should have their lives run by German and Hungarian women. That's been a rule to live by for me. So uptight Germans in charge of my courses to make sure they were well run and not by me. I could teach and not do the admin. So I started getting a few part-time people, affiliates network for training. So that's a very light model. And then we did an online conference called the Embodiment Conference. The first one went pretty well. 15,000 people turned up. And then the second one, 2 years
Mark.
later,
I love the way you go. Yeah. It went pretty well. 15,000 people turned up. Now, for many of us, including myself, I'm like, that's pretty epic, Mark. 50. I love the way that isn't your benchmark. I know what happens next, but let's not spoil it.
Yeah, it's because of what happened next. Maybe I see things differently.
And when was that?
I've already done... I don't know, that was like 6 years ago. And then I realized this online thing's a thing. And we started doing online courses. And then someone sneezed in China and the Chinese plague hit. And then we someone ate a bat or something. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so I was on tour. I was a super spreader. I was on tour coughing on everyone when that happened. I almost killed off all my competitors in California by having a lunch with them. And there's a great video of me just sort of coughing on everyone. It's like the day before everybody realizes, Anyway, so then the next Embodiment Conference, I like a challenge. So I thought, fuck it, how big can we make this?
Okay.
And as COVID had hit, that really helped. And 500,000 people were at that one. We had 1,000 presenters, which, I mean, no one's ever done a summit with 1,000 presenters before or since. It's completely insane.
That is insane.
So that was,
my brain is just exploding with the planning of that, Mark.
Germans. It's all about the Germans. I got a German and put her in charge of other Germans, and it all works out fine. So got Daniela was one of the three leaders of that, myself and Manal. And Daniela was an ex-German policewoman martial artist, and she's everything that sounds like, and she's awesome,
amazing,
and terrifying. And it did almost destroy me in her. So I mean, it wasn't necessarily advisable, but it was kind of like my Everest. You know, it's something I wanted to see. And then at the end of that, various things happened. But I was at the end of it, I was left with some money and a big email list and a staff, because we'd employed like 25 people and a whole lot of volunteers as well. But I said, you know what, let's just keep the staff on. And it was just easy to keep going. And then I accidentally was in charge of a multi-million-pound tech company. And we'd moved from in-person embodiment courses to mostly online stuff and publishing other people's courses. And I think it's the problem of adjacency. It looks like the same thing because I'm still doing a lot of embodiment stuff, but it's not the same thing managing a company as it is teaching in a small company. And yeah, it turns out I wasn't great at it. It was hugely stressful. And after a couple of years, I just went, you know what? It makes way more sense to scale this right back. And now I employ 5 people, and it's much nicer. And I spend like an hour a week managing instead of 5 hours a week, and I spend 2 hours a week in marketing instead of 10, and it's just less stressful. And the turnover is very different, but actually, I think it's more profitable. So, you know, turnover is just ego, right?
Absolutely.
Like the year after the conference, we had 2.1 million in and 2.2 million out. So I spent $100,000 in order. Now I was building a business and building assets, and but essentially I lost money in order to be really, really stressed and work 60 hours a week for a year.
And you got a
question. I paid for that privilege.
And get questioned for your sanity. Why would I do that to myself?
Yeah, and last year that was the opposite way around. I worked a lot less hours and we made more money. So, like in terms of profit.
Yeah.
So, like, and it's a lot of, I think, with a business is does this suit me? Is this what I want to be? Like, I've got a friend called Alex Howard. He runs big conferences and summits. He's really good at it. He does a 9 to 5 in the office. He's a straightforward guy. He's also a teacher of stuff similar to me, but he's much more suited to this stuff. He's much happier in it. He makes loads of money doing it. Good for him. He's a good, honest, solid businessman. And I'm not primarily a businessman. I'm primarily a teacher.
Right. And therein is the difference. And it's for people listening to this, is like, we had another guest on, James Gardner, and his provocation was, are you a project shop or are you a business? Because as a freelancer, he was saying people move just from project to project. He said, whereas a business is something you productize, and you've got very clear products, and you're not just waiting for one project to finish to move on to the next thing. You've probably got people working with you or for you, and you're very clear, as you're saying, about your purpose and what it is you offer, but you don't just move from one thing to another. And he says that's being a person who manages projects, and you probably work on
Yeah, I mean, I still have a payroll, that's still quite scary. And I definitely, I still have to make 20K a month just to kind of, get paid myself. So it's
how do you feel about that? Because that's a bit that scares me. So I've never done payroll. I do associate, and that makes me really nervous. I'd love to have a few more people on the team, but I freak out. I stop myself because I think, how am I going to pay people?
I mean, we've never not paid anyone. There was a couple of times they had to wait a month or something, but it is stressful and a privilege. There's a single mum in Hungary whose rent depends upon me doing what I do, so it's quite a lot of responsibility. And I think someone like me only grows up through taking responsibility, so it's probably good for me to take things a bit more seriously in life sometimes. But I think for people that already take things too seriously, it might be a bit of a heavy burden. And now we've got a flow going. It's sort of not, we can kind of predict within 10 or 20% what an income's going to be in any month, so it's not so terrifying now.
Okay. And what was it, so help me understand your business model in that, how are you selling products? Is it virtually, in person?
We mostly sell virtual courses, online courses, so online but live, so not evergreen.
Okay.
So we have a coach training course called the Certificate of Embodiment Coaching that we launch once a year.
Uh-huh.
That's probably about 70% of our income. It's good to have a flagship course.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote the book on embodied coaching, right? Like I'm probably one of the top 3 people in the world for that topic. So because of that, there's a lot of authority. I have a lot of reputation. We basically like people to be on our list and one of our 4 social medias, which is the podcast, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And different people like different things, unfortunately, but we recycle a lot of content across those 4. So that takes a team, right? I couldn't do all that on my own. There's no way. I mean, you could do one good social media yourself, but not 4. You know, I'd say if you're a solopreneur listening to this, I'd say just pick what's your favorite, Instagram, podcast, whatever. But so we manage to do all 4. We have a big list, and the list itself is, you know, it's a colossal list. So it's someone's half-time job just to manage the email list. It isn't, you know, we might send 20 different versions of an email any day of the week with 5 different subject headers and testing of the size of the email, and you know, it's a hell of a process. Like I don't even know the ins and outs of it anymore. That's Leela's job, thankfully. If you're out there, Leela, I love you. So you know, like that's a real technical analysis kind of job, and she's looking at the percentage open rates and click-through rates, and does it work better to have a picture or not have a picture, and you know, we A to E test 5 different titles on every email we send. So, you know, that's a tech business, right?
Yeah, my brain's like, I know A/B testing. You're doing A to E. Similar. I'm like, wow.
I even do that on my Tinder profile. It's a fantastic principle. It's basically the scientific method. You know, once you know about it, it's fairly easy to do. But and some platforms will do it for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, we should always be using that principle just to go, what is working? What am I getting feedback from the real world on? And then we do live events just because they're fun, and you can't really be an embodiment. I'm doing one this weekend.
Exactly.
They're juicy, they're connecting. I learn a lot when I do them, and also through them, I sort of often create what I'd call super fans who then go on to do some sort of mentoring.
Right.
So a trajectory might be someone downloads a free ebook from our website, free book on for coaches or whatever. Joins our list, comes to a free event, signs up for the Instagram or the YouTube. Does KEC, that's our coaching certification. 6 months later, they've done KEC, and they go, what do I do now? I offer them a mentoring program, and they come to a couple of live events, and that might be like a 3-year journey.
Wow. And you've got that mapped out. That's something you've
I mean, it's not rigid, but yeah. I mean, I'll like tonight, I'm doing a training, and I'll say, hey, where do you guys know me from? And I'll say, he knows me from the podcast, he knows me from the Instagram, and then we kind of track that, you know.
Wow. God, it's making me, if Emily's listening to this, who helps me with my social media, Emily, don't worry, we're not going down to that level of detail yet. We need a few more people to make that one happen. But it's impressive.
Yeah, but this is not a model for everyone. No. It's not a model for everyone. And part of me, like, I've got friends who make more money than me by employing, one half-time person.
Wow.
So there are models that are lighter.
Yeah.
Like George Kao, who sort of recommend people follow, who's a business coach, KAO. He recommends very light models, for example. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Tad Hargrave, I'd recommend people follow.
I love Tad. I met him last year.
He was staying here a few months ago.
No, I met him at the Happy Startup summer camp and had dinner with him one night.
Cool.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, Tad's a great guy. He stayed here for a couple of weeks, just hung out. It's good laugh, man. He's a great storyteller.
Yes.
And he's a magician as well. There's lots of things people don't know about him. But anyway, he does good marketing advice. Yeah. And again, he'd sort of not necessarily suggest this kind of bigger model. It's what works for me, though, because I just don't like doing things I don't want to do. Like, I don't want to spend 2 hours a week on the email list. I'd rather employ
That's
someone.
Okay. And it goes back to that point that you made earlier, and we both agreed on, is find your sweet spot and the things that bring you joy and make you happy and you're good at. And if you can outsource it, like the cleaning, which I do outsource, and the gardening, do that. Like, don't feel worried about having other people come and work for you. And then people go, but how can I afford it? You will. It'll work. It always works itself out because you get time back in your life to be able to do more. And it sort of, what goes around definitely comes around. Tell me about the journey, though, of going from small to big to medium in terms for you, like sort of mentally and emotionally. What was it? How has it been?
Small. Well, there was a sort of 10-year gradual build up, which was quite nice. And I was just growing into myself and getting better at what I do. And then there was this, overnight success that took 10 years in the making, right? With the embodiment conference, or 15 years in the making. And, with that, I think there comes risks of exposure, criticism increases, your ego can go through the roof. You've got to be careful of that. And expanding too quickly is a classic startup mistake. My friends told me afterwards. And I think you've got to be careful of ego at that point. And then the other thing is, once you're working at scale, it's very easy to get that wrong. Like if you've got, like at one point we had 150K a month payroll. Well, you only need to mess up a couple of launches before you're £500,000 in debt, which is what happened to us at one point.
Oh my God, how did that feel?
It's one of the worst things I can imagine. I mean, I've had some pretty hairy things happen in my life, and this was definitely in the top 5 worst. I don't recommend it.
No.
And then we sort of clawed our way back, and then kind of realized, when I kind of realized a bit late that it's my wife plays a lot of poker, and she said, "You're on a roll, and no one quits when they're ahead." Yeah, she said it's in poker because you could win every time in poker. You just go play poker, and whenever you're up, you quit. That's how you'd win, right? Like it'd be pretty straightforward to make money from poker, but no one ever quits while they're ahead, she says. That's how the casinos make money, because they know that you won't quit while you're ahead. Yeah. Like it's very, like the art of being a poker player is to know when to leave the table.
Yeah. And did you ever think, as you were at like scale, is this making me happy? Is this what I want to do? And think, do you know what? Maybe it's time
I realized
to
it wasn't.
Reshape.
Yeah, but by that point, you kind of, there's bills to pay, so you've got to be careful with that. But yeah, I went, oh, hang on, this is miserable. This isn't what I want to be doing. This isn't. I mean, in some ways, it's just getting caught by the mainstream values of chasing money and prestige, right? Like that's in the mainstream. We're all supposed to want to be rich and famous and all the rest of it. And I just sort of didn't really think you could do that with embodiment. But then when I realized you could, I got hooked on it a little bit. And then, I didn't like super sell out my values in a big way or anything, but there's that deviation, just a little bit, 1% each day away from what you really love. And that's dangerous. There's a real tantra in money, in that it is like, it sounds old fashioned, but talking about things like greed, I think is really important.
Yeah.
That those things will get hooking you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like sort of Shylock or something. What it looks like is just not speaking your mind and not quite doing the thing you love, and little knocks to your integrity. Like greed is a thing, and it could be greed for prestige rather than money as such.
What was the tipping point that made you go, I can't sustain this any longer?
I launched a mentoring program, committed to 2 years of work with a really nice group of people. I did most of the work myself for a Facebook post and then a bunch of WhatsApp messages. It took me no more than 10 hours to do. Brought in 150K income, and it was gone in 3 weeks. It's like the company just ate it. And I went, well, that doesn't make sense. I could have done that without a company. Like I could have literally just put on Facebook who wants to be my mentee. And it was a few hours of work of chasing and WhatsApping. They had to do a video application. And afterwards I just went, that's bonkers. This company's just ate this amount of income, and I've got to work for the next 2 years. And then I went, this can't continue.
Wow. Yeah, that is a bit of a moment. And at that time as well, does everything rely on you in terms of bringing the money in? I know you've got a big team behind you, but does it always feel like it sat on your shoulders?
At that point, I've increasingly trained someone in the company to do more of the marketing, which is helpful.
Yeah. Because I noticed
it's very difficult to get someone marketing people will speak a lot of bullshit and take your money, and they might even work hard, but they won't necessarily make you any money. So
sales.
I would caution about marketing people. It's very difficult to get someone to just come in and do that for you. And, leadership by abdication is pretty dangerous. And, I went to Ukraine to do a trauma project. Yes. And I left someone else running the business. And 2 months later, it was a mess, and like that was a mistake to just think, oh, I could leave a company of this size and swan off and do my own thing and it'll be fine. You can't do that as a leader.
What happened with that? Are you happy to talk about that?
Oh, it's complex, and the person's out there, and they're a good person, so I
Okay.
don't want to,
Oh, I'm not asking to name
just
it, but
let's just say I took my eye off the ball, and with a company that big,
yeah,
you can't.
no. It's a good learning for us when we're in those leadership spaces that you're the leader for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, now, for example, I just meet my finance person once a week and I go, right, what's gone in, what's come out? We sit down, we look at it on an Excel spreadsheet. It's just real clear. And just
Yeah.
doing that once a week, that's all the diligence I really need. It's not excessive.
That's a really good point, actually. Because there'll be a lot of people, and myself has been included in what I'm about to say, is the fear of the numbers and not necessarily being up close and personal to the numbers. What are the because you can look at your numbers in so many different ways, like we've just said, turnover is a vanity number. What are the numbers, the percentages that you pay attention to in those weekly check-ins?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple, like, so for example, running what's still essentially 80% an online business, it's always what's the size of our email list, what's the open rate, what's the click-through rate, and what's the sales page conversion. Those four numbers essentially define whether you have a business or not in the online space.
Yeah.
So that those four numbers we're tracking really carefully. And it's like, okay, is the list shrinking or growing this week, for example?
Yeah.
And then the rest is just the basics, isn't it? It's how much do we spend? How much are we making? The second number has to be bigger than the first number. And I got good at making money before I got good at not spending money. And so I kind of had half the equation figured out.
Yeah.
So I'm good at selling courses and doing cool stuff. But then I was like, oh shit, there's another half, which is keeping your payroll down.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit over generous, and I employed people I didn't really need to. And I listened to people and said, yeah, we need that person. And now I'm like, do we need that person? Do we really? Can we get a volunteer to do it? Can we get someone in Hungary to do it for a quarter of the price? These days you want to get money out of me. It's a lot harder. So
I'm really delighted that when I said to you what are the metrics you look at, you didn't go straight to the financial numbers. You talked about in this example, newsletter numbers like click rates, opens, because I think that's a really important thing for people to realize, that our measurements of success in our businesses does not have to be the bottom line. It can be.
I have multiple bottom lines. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, for example, if someone asks me to do a job, I'll say, is it going to be fun? And am I going to learn something? Am I going to help anyone? How much money are you going to give me?
Yeah.
So it's like one of four questions. And as long as like three of them are in place, I'll probably still do the job, right? Like I do jobs for no money that are loads of fun.
Yeah.
And, I used to work with gay community in Moscow for many, many years and just got almost no money from it. Pretty much zero from it, actually. And then someone asked, like, why do you do this? I'm like, because it's always hilarious. We always have like a really good time, and it was always, I used to say to them, as long as I just want to walk through the door and teach. I don't want any admin. It's going to be no stress. It's like, let's have a nice time. I was helping people, which is satisfying. I was always learning something. It's an unusual group of people to work with, and I was like, well, why not? It's not all about the money. And one metric I'm really looking at in the company is not really a metric. It's just how happy are people? Because we're quite a small team, and it's been really a problem if people aren't well. I just went all the way to Budapest to see one of my staff members because I just wanted to hang out with her, have coffee with her, and eat lunch with her and bond and connect, because like that's back to the beginning of the interview, that's embodied connection. Without that, you lose relationship, and it's like life's too short to be miserable. Like my health's more important than my business. Like I realized that last year. I now don't do anything for the business that's going to be damaging to my health, and we're constantly like, we launched a lot less this year than last year. We could have made more money, but we basically went, it's too stressful launching all the time. So now we're looking at like a more membership model, and because we don't want the stress of constantly launching. So our levels of sort of stress and happiness are quite an important thing that we think about in terms of, because you're not just designing a business, you're designing a life, right? Yeah. And in my case, it's a life like that impacts very seriously the lives of a few people that I care about.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point. I'm just trying to think. I've read about using happiness as the measurement of in a business. Like that's one of the key ways to say, are we being successful in all that we're setting out to achieve? And I think a lot of businesses shy away from that because they think it's too soft. But yeah, if you've got happy, healthy people, you have a business. If you don't have either of those, you might find you have people functioning in the structure of your business, but are you going to get the best out of them? Is probably what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it from a productivity point of view and say, I want to get the best out of people. But I just look at it like as a human point of view, you know, like even looking at it from the point of view of how can I squeeze the most productivity, like, you know, from these, like vampirically from these human beings
Yeah,
that work for me. Like, it's not really how I want to look at it.
that's fair enough.
So, it's just more values driven than that. But yeah, from a sustainability point of view, it's also key. And I've had quiet quitting before where people just are unhappy and then they just leave.
Yeah,
Especially with the sort of gig economy type workers, they can easily get a job somewhere else.
absolutely.
So, you know, that's a massive thing. If someone with a business my size, if someone leaves, it's a really big deal.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well. And the bit about happiness with my team, or I say to them, if things aren't going well for them, they're not feeling great. I'm like, look, we're not brain surgeons. We're not rocket scientists here. Like, I run a training business. It's okay. If you need to take time out, yeah, things will get a bit slower, but we're not going to fall apart, and that is okay. Because I think people feel very responsible for their actions, and it's like, yeah, but I don't want you to feel that responsibility or that weight if you're feeling shit.
Yeah, I have to tell off one of my team members for messaging me on a Sunday. I always tell her off, you know, because it's like for her benefit, you know, like helping people find those boundaries.
Well, we have to hold them in place ourselves. Mark, if you were to talk to your younger self about where you are now, what advice would you give?
There's no point. My younger self wouldn't have listened. All advice is bad advice. And he would have just told me to fuck off. So there's absolutely no point trying to give him advice.
I love that.
It's like he had to learn everything the hard way, and he did.
Interesting. So I ask a couple of quick fire questions, and one of the quick fire questions is, how have you invested in yourself or your business to support you to move forward? And I'm just curious about that in relation.
Well, I'm always learning. Like I'm always on a course every year, right? So I'm always you know, I'm always learning something else. I'm on a really good course this year on animism and mythology with a guy called Josh Schrei. He's got a podcast called The Emerald, which I highly recommend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good podcast. Maybe the best podcast, literally the best.
The Emerald.
So, yeah, Josh is great. So that's what I'm doing this year. You know, every year I'm doing a certain amount of embodied training, coach training of various kinds. I've been thinking about going back to basics and just doing a really beginner's level, my first coaching course, just to take it right back to first principles, which I think would be good. Yeah. So, and then within the company, I'm always encouraging people to be on courses. Like my email person's learning about Facebook ads at the moment. And, you know, I want people to I'm a big believer in employing people who are smart and hardworking and then paying for them to upskill. And then eventually you've got someone who's massively well qualified and they're loyal to the company in a way that it wouldn't be if you just got a highly paid consultant in from outside.
I like that.
I'm always paying for courses, and, you know, I'll say to someone, hey, you know, I've got $500. Do you want a course? You know, what do you need? So and we'll identify in the company sort of different areas that need looking at. So Facebook ads, it was for this person. They were really happy to do that, and they put aside a couple of hours a week, and it's great.
Great. I was going to say, who do you follow in social media land that you think others should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I said a few people. I'd say the key thing is to follow a diverse range of people in terms of views. So it's easy to get an echo chamber. So, you know, like most people listening to this probably quite left-leaning. They should probably find some sort of healthy right-wing people to follow, or at least centrist, someone like Jonathan Haidt or someone. And vice versa. You know, I mentioned Tad and George from a marketing point of view. They're great. Let's see. Coaches is lots. Like I've got friends that are always funny, like Jamie Cato, who's always got funny memes. John Williams, who does purpose stuff and marketing stuff, is good. He's got a good Facebook presence. In the embodiment space, there's all sorts of, you know, good teachers. People seem to like my 1 minute coaching videos on Instagram. They've been a big success.
Yeah, watching
people
those.
like those. A bit original. So I think people get a bit bored of people get a bit bored of sort of talking heads.
Yeah.
So we thought, what, we can show something rather than just talk about it, and that seems to have worked well.
And I think that's giving the value, giving value back to people, so they take something from it,
and it's real.
That's the thing. Okay, book recommendation other than your own.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I saw that ahead of time, and you know what? I'll just tell you the last books I read. Yeah. I do audiobooks.
Okay.
So these are the last books I read. Traditionalism by Mark Sedgwick, which is philosophy. The Nature Fix by Florence Williams, which is about the power of nature for our mental health, which is great. Stolen Focus by Johann Hari and The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. They're two I'd really recommend on technology and how it's impacting us.
What's the second, the last one? Stolen Focus and
Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, Haidt. He's a great author. Thomas Hubel, Attuned. He's an embodiment person I was just listening to. End Times by Peter Turchin. That's a history one. Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I mean, they're all pretty good. Oh, Lifting Heavy Things by Laura Kadari. She's a trauma and weightlifting person, a bit different. Beauty by Roger Scruton. There's a bit more philosophy. Your Brain on Love by Stan Tatkin. He's on attachment theory. That's good. There you go. That's what I've been listening to lately.
I'll have to go back and listen to that and write it all down for everybody to see in the...
I like audiobooks. I'm not very good at reading books anymore on paper. So audiobooks on trains and planes and stuff. Walking. I do a lot of walking in nature and listen to audiobooks and podcasts. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mark, thank you for being my guest today. It's been an utter pleasure having this conversation and just wending our way through your experiences of running a business.
Yeah, no worries. Shall I say where to find me for people listening?
Yes! Where can people find you? Sorry, I'm rubbish.
It's all right. No worries, Kirsty. Embodimentunlimited.com. Embodimentunlimited.com. There's a free book there on embodiment if you're interested in that topic, with lots of stuff for coaches and trainers, big names in trauma, lots of free resources. Embodimentunlimited.com. Or if they like books, put in embodiment. If they like podcasts, put in embodiment. Pretty much everything to do with embodiment. You'll
just
find
search embodiment.
Instagram.
Mark Walsh.
That is the Mark Walsh embodiment. You'll come up with whatever platform you prefer.
And we will put links all in the spaces below wherever I'm wiggling my finger / in the Spotify and Apple and YouTube. Mark, thank you. It was good to see you, and I'm sure we will pass each other in the social media atmosphere in the future.